Hi everyone, welcome back to Camp Conversations Keys to Resilience. I am Dayna Conway, your host, an educator, a clinical counselor, and the founder of Camp Mental Health. This podcast focuses on stories of resilience, and with every story, we share a few key takeaways to help build resilience in your everyday life. Today's conversation is a doozy. It is with a Canadian, Tim Parks, a successful businessman that has had a business in the automotive industry and who was wrongly accused of colluding with his bank manager to commit bank fraud while working in the US. And he was sentenced to a maximum security penitentiary in the US. And he served 2.5 years before winning his appeal and receiving a full acquittal. He joins us today to not only talk about this experience, but talk about the resilience that he had going into the experience, how this horrible experience furthered his resilience, and help us learn from his reflections of what it took to survive such challenging times, and give us a few tools that we can begin to use in our everyday lives. I'm so grateful for Tim speaking to us today, and I am excited for you to get to listen alongside me. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed recording this podcast. This is just such a crazy, shocking story that I am excited to dive into. And Tim, I think I just want you to open up by sharing with us how this story began, who you are, and we will go from there.
Yeah, Dana, thank you for having me on this show, this podcast. You've been doing some great work lately. It's amazing where you've come from and how successful you've been in all your endeavors with these podcasts. I've been following you for quite some time now. But yeah, who am I? I mean, I am I'm blessed. I have a family and I have work that I care deeply about. And that summers probably pretty much summarizes who I am and what I am today. I love production. I love work. I've enjoyed work my entire life, and I was mentored pretty much as a very young child by my grandfather and many other mentors that taught me the value of work. And yeah, I leaned into it. And it's not the reward so much as the work itself that I enjoy.
And Tim, we've had multiple conversations, and you have just the entire time given me little tidbits through your own experiences and your own entrepreneurial journey that I've taken and really appreciated. And one that I really, really loved was you told me, take in on your mirror in the morning, just write what is, and it's actually part of the idea of this spark that brought you to your work conversation that I have on this podcast. Is the way I interpret it is, what is your spark? What is the thing that you're hoping to bring to the world and to share, and write that somewhere? So when you wake up in the morning and it's hard to keep going towards that, whatever it is you're working towards, that you can kind of just focus back in on your day on that one simple message of what is keeping you going or brought you here in the first place. And I'm
Yeah, Dana,
curious.
that's so important, right? Because, when I was younger and involved in, different little small enterprises, and I had, as I mentioned, I had some mentors that just adopted me. I don't know why they did, but they did. And one of the things I learned early on is there's so much noise out in the marketplace. There's so much noise in your own personal life that you have one choice. And the only choice you can make in the morning is the attitude of which you choose. And with that choice, there's two or three things that you have to get done that day to accomplish whatever that goal may be, whatever that meaning may be in your life. And you have to block out all of the noise, completely isolate yourself, to accomplish those three things. And with accomplishing those three things, the next day that you get up, you have this very small deposit of self-confidence that you have accomplished them. If you practice that, I think in all terms, you do end up getting to where you want to be. There's a lot of deviations. There's a lot of different roads that you take, but I do believe that yes, wake up in the morning, put something on your mirror, three things you've got to accomplish. Understand the destination, very critical. Most people don't, but understand the destination of who you want to become and where you want to end up. Because
Mm.
life it's short and time
Mm-hmm.
is your complete enemy on accomplishing things. And as I
Mm-hmm.
say, the noise in the market, the noise in life today is like astronomical, right? We have so many different influences that are bombarding us all the time on social media and everything else. It's very difficult for people to keep focused.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. And I think those can be the first two tools that we draw out for our audiences. There's that macro level of where are we going and having that clear. And I see that as the thing that I put on my mirror. Like, what is that macro piece? What am I giving back? And then those micro pieces, those three steps of when the noise gets so loud and that big picture seems so far away, how can I jump back into just the here today and give myself that almost accomplishment or pat on the back of let's just focus in on these three things.
No, exactly. And I think that the young people today should really understand and identify what their talents are. And that's tough. I didn't understand my talents until I was 35. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what they were. I truly didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And, but once I did understand my talents, it led me to something else. And that was, um, I had basic talents in business, in marketing, in sales. But what I didn't have talents in cost me a lot of harm. I didn't have an understanding of finance and accounting and contract law.
Through starting businesses, through going the entrepreneurial lifestyle, you were able to build, you were able to deal with things changing at any moment, having a skill set to deal with these changes, being able to focus in on the getting through the details of today without having to get lost in the fact that there's going to be tomorrow, like more and more
Right.
problems arising.
I mean, you said that a lot better than I did, but well said. That's exactly right. But Dana, at the end of the day, everything that I was doing in my business could not prepare me for what was about to happen in 2009.
Yeah, and can you tell me about that? Can you
Yeah.
kind of build that up for me a little bit and help our
Yeah,
audience?
in 2009 there was a financial crisis going on in the States with the housing and the mortgage market, and Lehman Brothers was failing. A lot of banks were failing, and I got caught up in this crazy situation with my local bank. We were borrowing a lot of money. I had a failed production chemistry line that I had put all my chips into. I
Mm-hmm.
believed in the chemistry. Um, I believed in what we were doing, but it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
We were incredibly profitable prior to that and profitable after that, but for 2 years, it was a drain. And I had a local bank that I was very friendly with, and they were great to me, and I thought a lot of them. But what I didn't know was what was happening behind the scenes with him, embezzling money and creating fraudulent loans and whatnot. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, that my business um, problems that I faced, they didn't, nothing could prepare me for what I was about to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But in a very small way, the business problems did prepare me to at least lean into the tools that I established on solving problems when I faced this massive problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you this, the first thing that I discovered, and again, I'd been mentored on many accounts throughout my business career. And one of the wisest statements that was made to me when I was in my 30s was define the problem,
Okay.
understand the problem, define it. And what I quickly realized through this problem of being indicted and then going through the trial and then going through the prison and going through all of this stuff was that when I got indicted, I didn't take it that seriously because I thought it was absurd.
Mm-hmm.
At the time I was indicted, I didn't owe the bank any money.
Mm-hmm.
At the time I was indicted,
I read this.
I
All your
thought,
loans were paid off.
right, I
Mm-hmm.
thought this is the craziest thing. Obviously, the bank president had created these fraudulent loans, which, by the way, he created 300 of them
Yeah.
tied to me. And I thought, this is no signatures from me, no applications from me, but he did that. And I sat back, and a very good friend of mine came up to me and said, Tim, you've been indicted. This is pretty serious stuff. And I had a team of lawyers that I was working with for many, many years on business law and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember approaching a very good friend of mine who represented me. And I said to him, this is a problem. And he said, well, Tim, how do you define it? Because you always define problems.
Yeah.
I said, a big problem is when money can't solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And money can't solve this. It can't solve health issues. It can't solve relationship issues. It
Mm-hmm.
can't solve a lot of things. But guess what? This is a big problem.
Yeah.
What do I do? Right? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And we took a business approach to it. I put my company in a trust because I was convinced before I was indicted that they were going to try to come after bank accounts and whatnot. I had a lot of families involved. I had my family involved. We were incredibly profitable, and I wanted to protect all of it. So
Mm-hmm.
I hired my lawyer that was representing me as my CEO. And then I hired a president, and I put things in place before the house of cards from the government were going to come down on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this all before I was indicted. And thank God, for the sake of God. And as you
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm a Christian and I'm very faithful and devoted.
Mm-hmm.
But for the grace of God, this was put in place.
Mm.
And it was um, it was the hardest thing I could ever do.
Which piece of it?
Separating myself from the business.
Mm-hmm.
That was whew, that was take a deep breath, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
hard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I built this business.
Yeah.
My family benefited from the business. I had three girls, I had a wife, I had families.
Mm-hmm.
And separating myself from the business that I created and the trust and the support that Tracy gave me, my wife, to
Mm-hmm.
build the business. When you build a business, a couple of things have to happen. You have to establish roles.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Tracy and I walking down our driveway, and I said, this is getting to be a pretty big business, and I'm going to have to work half days. And she said, well, what are half days? And I said, 12 hours a day. And I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling. And
Mm-hmm.
this is out of control now, in that once you're in, you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You've got bank loans and you've got commitments and you got payroll and. And she looked at me and said, well, I've got the house.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I've got the house. I
Mm-hmm.
got the kids. You
Mm-hmm.
go do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough.
That
And
is.
then you lose it, meaning that you have to put it into a trust and you have to separate yourself from that.
Mm-hmm.
I was not allowed to um, I was not allowed to manage the business from prison.
Mm-hmm.
I got reports. I got phone calls. I
Mm-hmm.
did everything that I could to manage the business,
Mm-hmm.
and I managed it pretty well for myself. But my
Mm-hmm.
point was this, is that, you know, when you build something, you've got all these people that are relying on you, and you've got your loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're not at the helm.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
tough.
Well, and I hear you saying, I mean,
Crazy.
yeah, the sacrifices that it takes, but not just sacrifices, the trust of the people that you bring into the team to build this business. Because, I mean, I think entrepreneurs are always battling that piece of, is this selfish or is this a part of something bigger to give back? And then you hit that point of, it is something where I'm supporting so many, and then to
The
have that.
relationship, yeah, the relationships that you have with your employees and what you're doing with them, and the effect that it had on them going through this.
Mhm.
It's not just me. You
Mm-mm.
quickly realize it's not about me at all. It's
Mm-mm.
about, yes, of course, your wife, your children, your relative, the employees that are in the courtroom when I got sentenced. Every
Mm-hmm.
single one of them was there
Yeah,
supporting,
wow.
you know? And it's like, okay, what's going to happen to them? And have you left the business in good hands with the lawyer you've hired? And
Mm-hmm.
he was great. And the president I hired to execute, they were great. But more importantly, the people that were in VP positions, or even the general managers and operations and manufacturing. I mean, they were all they were all supportive of the entire process,
Yeah.
you know? So, yeah, I mean, that weight's heavy. That weight's heavy. And as I said earlier, nothing could prepare me for that. But I'll tell you, in hindsight, a lot of it did.
Mm.
I went through a very difficult situation when I was first sentenced. My, of course, they take you, the marshals take you, they handcuff you, they chain you on
And
ankles.
and you
And
weren't expecting, like, because
no,
when you were leading up, as you were just
well, no,
saying.
no, no. I was expecting home arrest until
Mm-hmm.
check-in. So they had already convicted me.
Mm-hmm.
But then at Christmas time, I had my family down. I was expecting to have Christmas there and then self check-in.
Okay.
But the judge, who I don't think a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
decided that no, that wasn't the case. He was going to wait till 7 o'clock at night and he was going to sentence me. And he sentenced me to the same sentencing as the bank president.
Wow.
And I remember standing in a cell with a convicted murderer who had just been arrested. And he had ended up murdering a gang member in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And um, he and I are talking. I'm in my suit. My lawyer comes in, who is, by the way, the most brilliant man I've ever met in my entire life.
Mm.
And he comes in, he goes, I know you don't want to do this, but I would like you to address the court. And here's what I want you to say. And I read it. And I said, no, I'm not going to say that. He goes, well, you probably need them not to say anything. I said, no, I'm not going to do that either. So I got back into court. Of course, all my employees are there. And the judge read my sentence, which was the same sentencing as the bank president that had been
Mm.
convicted, that admitted to the guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to the judge, and I won't get into everything, but I kind of laid into the judge a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever, I went on. I went on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got carted away. I was handcuffed and carted away. And the marshal, who was really good to me, I said to him, as people are leaving the courtroom, he said, we've got to cross the hallway. And I said, well, my daughters are about to come out with my wife, and I don't want them to see me handcuffed and shackled.
Yeah.
Can we wait? And he said, we'll do more than that. Let's go at the back door. I
Uh,
said, perfect. And he put me in a car and he drove me to Silverdale, which is a um, a state-run inmate center.
Hmm.
And he said, "You've had a tough day. Are you hungry?" I said, "Yeah, I'm hungry." He goes, "Let's go to Wendy's." And I'm sitting in the back and I'm handcuffed up. And he goes, "Chances are you're not going to run off, right?" And I said, "Probably not." He
Hmm.
goes, "Well, let me take your handcuffs off and let's have a burger and whatnot." So we had a burger in his car and he drove me there. And so I get there. I'm exhausted, mentally
Hmm.
done, right?
Hmm.
And they share you up, they process you, and it's 2 a.m. And they throw me into the cell with six other people, and they throw me onto this bunk with no mattress and no pillow, and it's amongst a gang in the pod.
Okay.
And for the grace of God, at 5 a.m, there's a janitor outside who's an inmate, and he's a big male.
Hmm.
I'm talking, when I say big, he's big. He's 6'6". He's muscular. He's big.
Hmm.
And he was a bank robber that he had robbed banks with his girlfriend at the time.
Hmm.
He comes bursting into my cell and he grabs me at 5 a.m. and says,
Hmm.
"This isn't good for you. You cannot stay here. You're
Wow.
coming with us."
Hmm.
And in populations, they don't assimilate, right?
Hmm.
It's not like a city or a country. And Dana, I was so exhausted. I slept for 2 days. Like
Wow.
literally, I got up, drank water, went back, and slept for
Wow.
2 days. And that was the worst part of my entire experience, which is why I'm mentioning it to you, because
Hmm.
I didn't have any control.
Yeah.
I had no ability to understand how my skill sets were going to apply at the time.
Hmm.
I couldn't I couldn't get my head around how things were going to work out.
Hmm.
All I knew is that I was in a really bad place and that what just happened was not forecasted or not predicted to happen.
Hmm.
Now remember, back in 2009, all the bank crisis, the financial crisis, and all that was going on, right?
And when I hear your story, and I guess the craziest piece to me is listening and how it went from regular life to flags that things are going wrong to boom, all of a sudden you are in a completely different world and like alien planet. There's never been any intel to give back to you to even know if there's a skill set to use, and then having to rely on potentially people helping you, but not being sure if they're helping you. And just, I can only imagine when I hear you say you slept for 2 days, like I can only imagine where your running level of anxiety or stress or whatever we want to call it emotionally was at.
Yeah. Yeah, that was at the height for sure. And shortly after that, after 2 or 3 days of trying to figure out what was going on, um, we had a good family friend who happened to be an attorney as well
Mm-hmm.
in labor law. And he would visit me every week because what happens in prison, inmates refer to it as diesel therapy. So what they do is they start shuttling you around from prison to city to prison
Mm-hmm.
for 3 days, 4 days. So you're always with different inmates. You're always trying to navigate different environments and circumstances. And
Mm-hmm.
they do this, they call it diesel therapy, to condition you. So when you finally get to your resting place, you're somewhat beaten down.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from, Chattanooga to Atlanta to Kansas to here to there, and I finally arrived. But prior to that, I had many, many good friends of mine that are lawyers, and they would visit me because a lawyer is permitted to visit me.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy, the girls cannot.
Mm-hmm.
They can visit you on a screen, but it's very uncomfortable for them. Okay, they can't see you, right? And this guy, I'll refer to him as Jay, would come and visit me,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd ask me how I was doing, and I realized that a lot of the inmates they don't send in money for the commissary.
Mm.
A commissary is just what it is. It's a list of products that you can purchase if you have money in your account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Tracy had funded that for me. But this guy Jay would come in and he would leave a pen with me or a pencil. And at first it was like, Jay, I need a
Mm-hmm.
pen. I need a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point I'm documenting everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm writing. And I'm writing on every piece of paper I can find.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Why?
I want to document absolutely everything to understand my appeal, understand what I went through, understand my emotions, my feelings. Um, I learned early on in business that your feelings are not your thoughts, and your thoughts are separate from your feelings, and you've got to damn well compartmentalize those in business
Mm-hmm.
because you can make some really bad decisions with feelings and not thoughts. So
Mm.
you have to be in a state of mind that when you're looking at a problem in business, that you have to be able to understand and construct all of the various options of the facts and the
Okay.
truth to understand the right decision. If you input the feelings into it, you are screwed.
It's
Like
all
literally
cloudy.
upside down screwed. Right?
Okay.
So I was trying to figure out the separation between my feelings at the time and my thoughts, and they were blurred. They were
Mm-hmm.
terrible because of my emotional state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was writing down things all the time. But as I was writing down things, I had a pen or a pencil. Well, other inmates wanted pen or pencils.
Mm.
So every week, I'd ask John, bring me in 3 pencils, 4 pencils, 5 pencils. So he'd bring me in these pencils, and I would end up giving them to other inmates, and they would use them, obviously, to write
Mm-hmm.
whatever they were writing, and
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't have to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a point where the warden at this prison had ordered a guard to do a complete search of why I'm getting all these pencils. So I had to strip down, bend over, all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they thought that somehow the pencils were contraband.
Mm.
Like, were there drugs inside the pens? I mean, all this stuff, right? It was the
Yeah.
craziest thing you'd ever witness. I mean,
Yeah.
who would have thought, right?
Yeah. Pencil.
But I ended up with a lot of pens and pencils,
Yeah.
and more importantly, it created this. I didn't know at the time, but it did create this understanding of how to be relevant in prison, right?
Mm.
And relevance leads to, of course, resilience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know at the time, but it led me to believe that, what are my talents? What am I good at? I have some resources. There's inmates that want certain things. Oh, they want pencils. They want pens. How can I trade those? What can I do? I didn't realize that at the beginning. It took me months to figure it out.
Yeah.
But when I finally did arrive at Natchez, which is where I spent 2.5 years, there were 200 inmates. It grew to 2,200. And through that process, I knew that I had to become relevant to that population. I didn't have an affiliation. I wasn't a gang member. There were very few Canadians there. There were some. I was
Mm-hmm.
going to be, deported to Canada should my appeal not win. And you had these different affiliations, and a lot of them were at odds with each other. They were gang members. They were mostly drug related, right? So these
Mm-hmm.
were opposing gangs. And when I finally got there, I did realize that, yeah, relevance is going to be very important for me to understand. I've got resources. How can I be relevant to these people? Oh, I got to be on the board on the commissary from an inmate perspective. So there were 6 of us, so I formed a board. We decided what was going to be on the commissary list,
Mm-hmm.
rice, and different types of things. And we got to negotiate. And we were kind of Canada in that we were Switzerland. I mean, we could walk into these different areas of prison, that others couldn't walk into because we had a relevance and
Mm.
importance to them trying to figure out, what they wanted on the commissary, right?
Yeah.
So the whole pencil thing led up to that. I didn't know at the time. I
Yeah.
wasn't smart enough to figure that out. But by the time I got there, yeah, we figured that out.
Wow. So, okay, help me kind of summarize everything that I'm
Yeah,
learning from
go
you.
ahead.
So, the diesel therapy piece of bouncing you from place to place, I'm
Brutal,
hearing, yeah, and it's
brutal.
trying to break you because, like that first night, it's throwing you into completely unknown situations that you have zero prep for to really just anger each other inmates, and then deal with the harsh realities of not being prepared for a new environment. And then somehow you were able to keep going throughout that. And I'm sure that that breaks people. And then in starting to tap into some, I don't know, some prior knowledge that you have of yourself, of knowing that I'm in this space where there is so much emotion going on, and I can only imagine the level of emotion that was there. And through experiences, some as an entrepreneur, learning that I cannot make decisions that keep myself moving forward or that are beneficial to myself if I make them from the point of emotion. So I need to start filtering through the noise. And then
Yeah, the noise is a big problem. But when you look at resilience, right, it's about endurance. So what are you doing for endurance? You're working at, you're
mm,
getting the endorphins running, right? You're doing everything you can to maintain that. And then you're looking at adaptability, to adapt to certain situations, which is part of resilience. And then you're looking at recovery, right?
mm.
How are you growing from all that, right? And
Were
then
you asking
growth.
yourself that? Yeah.
What's that?
Was that a question you would ask yourself? Like, what am I?
Absolutely. My
Yeah.
gosh, yes. I
Yeah.
mean, in business, I would ask myself, what have I grown? Where am
Hmm.
I today? Where am I going to be tomorrow? Where was I last week? Of course. I mean, it is a constant diligence of growth,
And did
right?
you, yeah, and how, I guess one that, like, if I ever try to put myself in your shoes for a second, which I can't even do, but being in the moment, having a sentence that I didn't even think was going to come into fruition, and then not knowing when it was going to end, like how, because we talked at the start about like that macro level of like having that, how did you deal with that, not having that clear time frame?
Yeah, the biggest challenge there, and that's where my faith plays a big part of it, right? Right. I
Mm-hmm.
have with Viktor Frankl, if you read some of his readings, he has a book called The Unconscious God.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all this stuff sent into me. I mean, I was in an environment where things were happening that were really weird, in that you had to be relevant to the community you were in, which we were.
Mm-hmm.
I set up shops, like kind of small little grocery stores in all of the different pods of the
Mm-hmm.
prison. And there were like 14 of them because they didn't
Wow.
have the money to do it. So they would sell Coca-Cola and fish and such. But on the other side of it, there was a really wrong thing going, right? There were
Mm-hmm.
more drugs inside the prison than there were outside. I used to
Mm-hmm.
say to my buds in inmates, and most of them, very few were white collar crime. Most of them were, gang crime or drug crime.
Mm-hmm.
They play soccer 8 hours a day. Well, they play soccer, but they kick the damn balls sometimes over the two barbed wire fences.
Okay.
Well, the families of the highly intelligent gang members, and these guys are smart. These guys are
Mm-hmm.
not like, don't underestimate the guys that are leading the gangs. I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you, I've met some really smart people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are intelligent, but they're in a lane that's all they know. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the balls would go over. Well, the gardener or the guy cutting the grass would take the ball and fill it full of phones and drugs, and next day it'd be kicked back over.
Oh,
Right?
well, yeah.
I mean, things would be happening like that all the time in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I had actually, I didn't, I didn't have, but my bunkie had a sinus infection. And I said, well, I got to get you something. And he goes, yeah, call so and so. And we went out to the yard and we told so and so. And he comes in and he's got his prison garb on, and he's sewed it so that he's got buttons down the front. He opens it up. There's like 75
Pharmacy.
pockets, and each pocket there's anything you want.
Ah.
Like literally cocaine, weed, heroin, whatever you want. He's gonna buy it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that happens a lot in every prison. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
our prison. So you got to get your head around how you can look away from that. Particularly being a Christian as I am, you got to
Mm-hmm.
look away from that because you can only manage the circumstance that you're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the circumstance you're in, you better be present. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not the minute later. If you can manage every single minute you're in prison, you're
Mm-hmm.
basically managing your future.
Mm-hmm.
The past has been done. A minute's gone. You've already managed it. The present is where you are.
Mm-hmm.
The minutes are coming forward. You got to manage it. And there's a lot of things you can't control,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is why when you move into a cafeteria in prison, where do you sit? You don't sit in the center. You sit on the edge in the perimeter with your back against the wall. To this day, when I go out for dinner at a
Mm-hmm.
restaurant, I'm never not facing the door.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always facing the door. Now, that's just kind of my experience. It's kind of weird,
Yeah.
but I'm comfortable sitting there, right?
Yeah. Just
So I think resilience is very much a layer. It's like paint. You've got to put yourself out there to experience some very difficult circumstances.
mm-hmm.
And as you do, you gain confidence with your success and you put another layer of resilience. It's an armor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more you put yourself out there and understand the issues and the problems and resolve them, good or bad, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that every time you put yourself out there, you build this resilience, this layer of armor. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that your whole study of what you're doing, I do believe that resilience, you're born with a level of resilience as a very small infant. I mean, infants can live through a tremendous amount of issues, right? We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think over time, um, not all children continue to put themselves out there to build resilience up,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think there are layers of resilience you can build upon for sure, 100%.
And
At
and
least in my
I
experience, may not be
well
for everybody.
and I think you have one more thing that you're not giving yourself credit for too, is that yes, I mean you were exposed to a lot of scenarios to build resilience and add that layer of paint on. Um, but I think a huge piece too was that reflective practice that you brought into it, because I think exposure on its own, it can go one way or another. It can either be a
Yeah,
growth point for us or it can break us down. And when,
absolutely.
yeah, and when you brought that reflection piece on of, okay, what is the noise? What's the noise I want to listen to? What is my true self? What is the path I want to take here? And where is emotion helping or hindering? And just to make that inner voice or those inner needs clearer, I think then that paint just is that smooth protective layer instead of the harsh stuff that kind of chips away at us.
I think the chipping away is really, really something you just hone in on. I think the chipping away is it is difficult. It's hard, and not everyone. We're all born as a type. I believe that we have different personalities,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the um, one of the best experiences I had being in prison was we had a psychiatrist that came in. I found out that environment plays a massive part on who you become,
Mm.
right? And it opened up my eyes because I always thought that as a young man that if you wanted if you want to change, your environment, you have the ability to, but that's not true. Everyone may have an opportunity, but not everyone has the same opportunity, right? And the empathy that I discovered in prison has stayed with me over the years. And this guy brought in five or six different inmates that were 17 and 8, well, 17, 18, just turning 18. And they were gang members and they wanted to leave their gangs. And that was a really big problem, right? Because they couldn't discuss that amongst their gangs because they're very militant, right? Um, but these young men came into the group. The group lasted 3 weeks because after 3 weeks, there were too much chaos. The warden shut it down because it was creating too many problems in amongst the gang members. But these young kids, he would talk to them in such a way and he would discover, how did you end up where you are? And what happened? How did you get to where you are today? And what we found out over the 3 weeks was that a lot of these gangs, they go in these villages in Mexico and, in South America, and they go in with pickup trucks and guns and women and drugs and watches and all sorts of things. They pick these kids up when they're 15.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you probably heard the stories, but the reason why they're picking these kids up at 15 is because these kids want family. These kids want to belong to something other than what they have. They've seen their parents struggle, and so the kids
Mm-hmm.
jump in the trucks and they move on,
Mm-hmm.
and they become incredibly loyal to whatever the gangs are doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the interesting part, and then it got shut down. The interesting part was these kids at 15, they're born, I believe that every child is born with a moral compass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And these kids were taught to do heinous crimes. I'm talking about most of the crimes that are done I'm talking chopping off heads and arms and legs and hanging
Mm-hmm.
people from bridges. Most of them are done of ages under the age of 22.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are trained to do that stuff, right? Well, the
Mm-hmm.
kids that are in this round table, you know, prison conference, if you will, at the end of 3 weeks, they're crying. They can't believe what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
They're now 18, 19, whatever the age is, and they're trying to repent
Mm-hmm.
and they struggle with it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they literally break down, which is
Mm-hmm.
why it all stopped, right? Because they would then go back to the gangs, and the gangs would, try to reinvigorate them and so on and so forth. But um, most of gang members that are 22 and up,
Mm-hmm.
they're not doing those crimes anymore. They can't. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
the moral compass to do it. They leave it to the younger kids.
I mean, I think it just really speaks to, if I could replace mental health with any other word, it would be
Yeah.
belonging.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is a really like extreme and horrible and just heartbreaking example of how we all thrive to just belong when we're young. And I think in a more relatable way, maybe for some of our listeners too, is when we're working in schools with camp and we see, let's say, for example, like the kid that is just so silly and like interrupts no matter how much they get in trouble and is just the class clown and et cetera, et cetera. And the school, by the time they purchase for camp, are like, we've tried everything. We've tried like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, all these different ways, like the kids that you're talking to. And really, when you get and to that kid and sit down with them, you realize that they have found belonging within that class or within their peers
Right.
or even within the school through that personality. And although it feels horrible when they get that negative feedback, or we're just so driven to belong that until we support people in figuring out a adapted or positive way to belong, then yeah, by default, if we find a negative way, and there's so much safety in that. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy how the human mind works.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's um it's astonishing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think you bring up such a great point too, because you found belonging, if we do air quotes, by leaning into a skill set that luckily you're like within life you had strengths of being able to see a problem and okay, what does this person need? How can I find safety in how I interact with um, others here and build this commissary of selling. And you had that skill set, and yeah, when we look at fairness, yeah, when you're entering a system like that and have never had any exposure to a skill set other than the skill set that brought you into that system, then oh yeah, it is a
Yeah,
whole
and then
different view of what is fair and where how to build empathy. Mhm.
and then you think a little, perhaps I think a little bit deeper, and I look at, the young children today and what they're exposed to, and who are they being guided by and mentoring by? And quite frankly, it just worries me so much because I think, oh my gosh, I mean, what are my grandsons and my granddaughter being taught? And
Mhm.
it's, for me, it's a major worry, a major worry.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there is um, just like we brought up the point of that piece of resilience of you building in that reflection practice. I think that is another point that our audience can take from listening to you is yeah, it doesn't have to be in the darkest of times where we go into that reflect. I I know it wasn't for you. That's why you have that practice. But I think some of us, we wait till we're really struggling and speak to a counselor or speak to someone to go into that place of like, let's build some reflection. And it's no, even things on how we parent, what values we're bringing forward, what we're exposing
Yeah,
everyone to, or who am I surrounding myself by? Right?
right.
All of those are important reflection pieces. Um,
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, when I came out, I
that's what I
found
was going to
myself.
ask you.
Yeah, I found myself. I really liked the bathroom. I could shut the door and feel safe,
Mm,
right? Small quarters. Funny enough, when I first got into my cell in Natchez, the door would lock and close, and I felt unsafe because I didn't know how to get out. And
mm,
then shortly after, maybe a year or so, when the door locked, I felt, thank God, another day, I'm safe.
mm,
Interesting flip on perspective, right? When I came
mhm,
home, I felt really safe in my bathroom. I could
mm,
close the door and lock it. And kind of interesting, right? But the other thing that happened to me, I think, when I got out was I'm a big car guy. I love
mhm,
cars,
mhm,
automotive background, all that kind of stuff. And I still have it here. I drove my 2000 and let's see, 2007 truck with roll-up windows. It doesn't have air conditioning. It
mhm,
doesn't have anything else. I drove that for 6 months to my office without getting a new vehicle.
mm,
And the reason why I did is that when I first came out, driving a vehicle with all this crazy sensory stuff going on in this new world,
mhm,
it blew me away of how much information I was receiving in my head.
mm,
And it took me 6 months to drive that vehicle. I mean, driving was a problem. I mean, driving to stay focused and drive with everything going on around me as I'm driving.
mhm.
It shocked me because I love driving, and that's not necessarily something that I would, be concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
but driving was a problem. The other problem I had, quite frankly, um, was, 3 weeks after I left the prison, there was a riot that killed guards and friends of mine,
Mm.
and it totally got out of hand. And then a lot of the folks inside of prison, because I flew back to the prison to visit some of my guards and friends,
Mm-hmm.
and um, what they told me was that there was a great celebration when I left the prison. And they were all out in their outdoor spaces, and the warden comes and gets me, and the judge didn't release me for 30 days. So every day I thought I was going to get out, I didn't get out. That played on me. But I
Wow.
finally got out, and the warden's walking me out, and there's a big celebration out with all the inmates. They thought this was great. And I get to the warden's office, and I said, well, order me a taxi.
Mm-hmm.
And I had Tracy and some others flying in, and the warden said, "I can't release you." This is a funny story, actually.
Okay.
So I said, "Well, you can. I've got money in my account. Give me my cash. Call me a taxi, and I'm leaving." He goes, "Well, I have an agreement with the county that I can't release you." I said, "I won't mention his name." I said, "You're going to release me. You know me. I'm leaving. Here is my release. Goodbye." He goes, "Okay." So he calls a taxi, and it's like a 1988 Oldsmobile, and it's got this burgundy velvet material in the front seat and the back seat.
Yeah.
And the guards walk me out, right? And she says to the guards, "Is he okay to take to where he wants to go?" "Yeah, yeah, he's good. He's good." "Okay." So she's taking me to Natchez, which is about 20 minutes away. And I'm looking at all the trees. I love trees. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
fascinated with the landscape and all this stuff. And we arrive, and she can't really turn around too much because she's driving and she's quite large. And
Mm-hmm.
she goes, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Well, give me a restaurant. Like, where do you want to, where do you want to take me?" "Well, there's TGIFs. We can go there." I said, "Go there." Went into TGIF, and now I'm in sweatpants, gray, with a gray cap, right? I look like I've just come out of prison.
Yeah.
And I go up to the hostess, and she goes, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'll just go to the bar." So I go to the bar and order a whiskey. Can't stand the stuff. Don't like it. I come back. She goes, "You want a table?" "Give me a table." "Yeah, I have a table. I have a glass of red wine. I have steak." But then I realized that no one knows where I am. So I got to call my wife. So I go up to the hostess and I said to her, "You're not going to believe this, but I just got out of prison. I'm enjoying the steak, the wine. They don't know where I am. They need to come pick me up. I don't have a phone." She said, "Here's my phone. Here's my phone. Take it, take it." And I called them. They picked me up and flew me home. Anyway, that's my story.
Wow.
Um, I had a whiskey that night. I think I had two. I ended up sleeping on the couch because, after a couple of years, two whiskeys. I mean, two whiskeys today, saying, "Hey, it's our third," but not more than a third. But two back then was like, whoa, a
Yeah.
lot, too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Just a whole different like
Yeah,
reintroduction.
yeah.
What would you say, I guess, what would you say was the hardest thing about transitioning back into home or into life, into business?
Um, there's so much going on, so much noise going on in this world. It's overwhelming. When you're shut down for 2 years, you don't have the noise. You come back out and you realize how crazy this world is. It's
Mm,
it's crazy. It's crazy. To stay laser focused on what's important to you, family, children, business, whatever, it's hard. It's
mhm.
really, really hard. It takes a lot of discipline and diligence. Um, yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, people
so,
don't realize how difficult life is today in this world. It's crazy.
mhm. So knowing that. looking at your own kids and grandkids, is there anything from your experience of having the noise dimmed down and now seeing it turn back up that you would recommend for them or anyone listening?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, all the production, the riches, the stuff that we all have, it
Mm-hmm.
means absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
What is pure, what is true, what is noble, what is right, what is amazing, what is admirable are in all the relationships that you own. That's it.
Mm,
Nothing else counts.
I love
Nothing.
that. And I love how you tied that in our opening to us, where you said relationships, money has zero impact on your relationships. It is what you
Nothing.
bring to them and put into them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Tim. I'm just so honored to have the chance to talk to you and hear this story and share this story. Is there anything, any last words you'd like to share with our audience before I sign off?
Yeah. So I would like I guess I would like to suggest to your audience and your listeners, zero in on the relationships that you have, cherish them. They're special. You can't replace them. It's what life's all about. Truly, it is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye, audience. Thanks
Bye.
for listening.